What are the odds the New York Mets make the playoffs this year? We're going to go through a full betting preview for how Vegas views the Mets on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers who join today will get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Speaking of FanDuel, all of the odds that we're going to talk about on today's show did come directly from FanDuel. And the reason why I wanted to do a betting show is because it's an interesting barometer for how Vegas, or in this case FanDuel, views the Mets compared to other teams in baseball heading into the season. We're about a month away from opening day. Those odds can change a little bit. The numbers might move, but for the most part, the Mets offseason is done. I don't expect them to go out and sign anybody else that'll drastically change things. They basically are what they are. And if you look at their over-under win total, what do you think they are? Over the weekend, I was on a Locked On NL East roundtable, which is going to come out at some point. I'll let you know when I have an idea when that show is actually going to be released. But we talked about the betting odds, and even earlier in the show, they were asking me about the Mets' chances, and I said, probably about a 500 team this year, and if everything breaks right, they might win a little bit more than that, sneak into the playoffs. If not, you never know. Things might go the wrong direction, and they're a little bit below 500. So, of course, when they then ask me, what do I think their odds are, or their over-under is, or how do I react to seeing the over-under 81.5, I was not surprised at all, because that's exactly how they are viewed when it comes to the odds. It's a 500 baseball team. Now, I would bet the over. I think things are going to break right, but I'm an optimist. I'm a Mets fan. So I totally understand the pessimistic view that I'm sure is out there, where people are looking at the Kodai Senga injury now. They're thinking about a starting rotation that's going to have Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, Adrian Hauser, and Tyler McGill for at least the first month of the season, if not the first 2 months, and say, yeah, this team's not going to win a lot of games. Totally get that viewpoint. But right now, the odds 81.5, or the over-under at 81.5. Now, the Mets' chances to make the playoffs, plus 196. So if you bet $100, you get $196. The Mets were able to sneak into October. I think that's a pretty interesting bet. There's actually a better one that we're going to talk about in the next segment that I think is a place that you should put your money over just the Mets making the playoffs. But that is sort of interesting to see that they are viewed as that much of a underdog to actually sneak in. Now, if you bet $50, you win about 100. So, if I was going to play it, I certainly wouldn't play $100 for the Mets to make the playoffs this year, because I just don't know if it's going to happen. When you compare that to other teams in the NL East, though, the Marlins are plus 280. So seen as even more of a long shot to make it. The Phillies, minus 245. It would be a shock if they didn't make the playoffs. And here's the one that got me. The Atlanta Braves are minus 4,000 to make the playoffs. That means you'd have to bet $4,000 to win 100 for the Braves to just get into October, because of course they're going to be a playoff team. Now here's the good ones, right? Mets to win the division, Mets to win the National League, Mets to win the World Series. To win the division, they're plus 1,200. Stay away from that. There's no chance. I don't see them beating the Braves or the Phillies in this division. They might be a wild card team, but I'd be shocked. Now, for them to win the National League, I almost think that's more likely. I almost think it's more likely for the Mets to win the National League, because that would mean they're a wild card team that got hot. I could see that happening more than the Mets winning the marathon this year. And the odds there at plus 2,100. To win the World Series, they are plus 5,000. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the other teams in Major League Baseball and their odds to win the World Series, the Mets have a better chance to win the World Series based on the odds than the Reds, the Padres, the Giants, and the Brewers. That's 4 teams that are, in the wild card hunt, you would think this year, they're at least teams that are trying to contend. Now, if you look at the odds for winning the World Series, or even, to make the World Series, to win the National League, here are the teams that are ahead of the Mets. The Dodgers, best odds. Braves right behind them. Phillies, Cardinals, Cubs, Diamondbacks. The Mets have the 7th best odds. 6 teams make the playoffs. So you look at it from that perspective of all of the wild card hopefuls heading into the season, the Mets are, viewed in a better light than some of these other teams that are going for it. Like the fact that the Mets have better odds than the Reds, that's surprising to me because I think the Reds are a really exciting young team that, quite frankly, even though they don't have a great ace atop their rotation, I don't know if I would, take the Mets rotation over the Reds. I mean, they got Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo. Those are 2 young, interesting pitchers. Lodolo had a kind of wash of a year last year because he got hurt, but he's got a lot of talent. They signed, Frankie Montas. That's not the best signing, but they also, went out. They got Nick Martinez. They added some depth. Graham Ashcraft, Andrew Abbott. Like they have some options there, and then they have so much exciting young talent. Like I think I would probably skew more towards the Reds having a better chance to go for a run this year, but Vegas thinks otherwise. So it's just interesting. And the Padres too. I mean, that just shows their lack of pitching, I think, but the star talent, or the star power, I should say, on that team, and their odds are worse than the Mets. That's also interesting to me. Now, what I also did is I went back to an article I wrote last year for Just Baseball, and it was World Series odds to start the season. How much do you think have the Mets dropped off in a year when it comes to preseason World Series odds? Last year, the Mets were plus 900 to win the World Series. That was even with the Padres and 5th best going into the season. The favorites were the Astros, the Braves, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and then Mets, Padres. Those were 5 teams. Excuse me, I count the wrong 6 teams because Mets and Padres were tied there that had odds that were less than 1,000 to win it all. Right now, there are 4 teams with odds that are less than plus 1,000. You have the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, and the Yankees. So you see how much the Mets and the Padres in particular have fallen off in a year, and that is obviously justified based on the season that they had and the stark difference in their offseason compared to last year where they were the 2 biggest winners. Now, let's also look at the odds last year, though, for some teams that did very well in the season, because this is not the end-all, be-all. The fact that the Mets are plus 5,000 to win the World Series right now and plus 2,100 to win the National League and plus 1,200 to make the playoffs, that does not mean that their season is over. They still have a chance to change that narrative. Heading into last year, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who did end up in the World Series, were plus 12,500. So if there was some Diamondbacks fan who put $10 on his team to win the World Series in February last year, they were sitting on a ticket that could have had them win over $1,000 if the Diamondbacks had pulled that off. Came up just short. I hope he hedged if there is that fan that's out there. Now, other odds that were interesting to me, the Orioles last year were plus 6,600. They ended up with the best record in the American League. The Rangers, who won it all, were plus 5,000. The exact same odds that the Mets have this year. So guess what? It is possible. Not likely, but it's possible. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe the Mets go out and they have a sneaky good first couple months. Kodai Senga comes back. They swing a big trade at the deadline to get, I don't know, Shane Bieber. And all of a sudden they got a rotation that can do it. And the Mets shock the world in the first year of Carlos Mendoza being the manager, which is maybe my sneakiest favorite bet for this season when it comes to futures. I want to talk about some awards, some player props, and more. We'll get to all of that in the next segment. First, though, who do you think today's show is brought to you by? Oh, yeah, it's brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. You bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. And, of course, throughout the show today, we've been talking about all the MLB futures you can find. So those odds I discussed, Mets winning the World Series at plus 5,000, winning the National League at plus 2,100, making the playoffs at plus 1,200. You can find all of that over at FanDuel. And again, you place that $5 bet right now if you want to bet on, an NBA game, take whatever team it is that you think is a favorite to win that night, and they do, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Pete Alonso is heading into his walk year, as we all know, which means he'll be incentivized to put up some big, big numbers. Steve Cohen on a podcast with Howie Rose, I think that was over the weekend, he said that he would love nothing more than Pete Alonso hitting 55 home runs and making it really tough on him. Of course, he was also talking about how the Mets view him as a future cornerstone. They love to keep Pete. Steve Cohen said he's not tone deaf. A lot of interesting stuff in that conversation with Howie. I encourage all of you to check it out. But he's hoping for a big season from Pete, and you can win some money alongside of Pete Alonso, who's going to be earning the real big bucks if you want to lay some wagers on his stats this season. So the first one to look at is regular season home run leader. Pete Alonso is plus 850 to lead a league in home runs. That is tied with Matt Olson for the second best odds. Number one is Aaron Judge at plus 420. And then right behind Alonso and Olson, you have Shohei Ohtani at plus 900. Now, if you want to look at just Pete Alonso to hit his over-under on home runs, that number is set at 41.5, and I definitely think he's going to hit the over. You got to bet on one or the other when it comes to an over-under. The Mets regular season win total of 81.5 or Pete Alonso to hit over 41.5 home runs. There's no question which bet you should make. It's on Pete. That's a much safer place to put your money. Now, regular season RBI leader, Pete Alonso's at plus 1,200. That is tied with Juan Soto for the fifth best odds. That trails behind Yordan Alvarez, Aaron Judge, Matt Olson, and Shohei Ohtani. I'd probably go, well, it's tough because I was going to say I'd go for RBIs over home runs just because the odds are a little bit juicier. But on second thought, I just remember the guys hitting around Pete Alonso in this lineup. And when you think about the names ahead of him on this list, Yordan Alvarez, he's in a great Astros lineup. Aaron Judge, great Yankees lineup. Matt Olson, come on. He did it last year with the Braves. Shohei Ohtani, now getting a chance to drive in potentially both Betts and Freeman, who might hit ahead of him in that ridiculous Dodgers lineup. Yeah, I'd probably stay away from Pete Alonso to lead the league in RBIs the more I think about it. Regular season hits leader. I was curious, where is Jeff McNeil on this list after a down season? He's pretty far low on it. He's actually below Brendan Nimmo, who's got plus 10,000 odds. Jeff McNeil plus 11,000 to lead a league in hits. So if you put $5 on Jeff McNeil to lead a league in hits, not batting, this is hits, you'll win 550, which is an interesting wager to place. But I will note that even when he won the batting title, he trailed Freddie Freeman in hits by 25. So most likely when the odds are that long, it's probably because it's not going to happen. But hey, if you want to sprinkle somewhere, I wouldn't be mad at you on Jeff McNeil hits. Edwin Diaz, saves leader. He has the third best odds behind Josh Hader and Emmanuel Clase. Camilo Doval is tied with Edwin Diaz. Their odds to lead a league in save, it's at plus 800. I'd stay away there. The Mets got to win games for Edwin to get saves. I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get. If this was a bet on the reliever to lead the league in ERA, I lay all the money on Edwin. Saves, I just don't know if he's going to rack up 45, 50 saves on a Mets team that might only win 84 games. It's not likely. MVP odds. Pete Alonso is at plus 2,500. That's tied with Austin Riley and Manny Machado. Francisco Lindor is at plus 3,000, tied with Paul Goldschmidt. You look above those guys, you got Acuna, Betts, Freeman, Ohtani, Tatis, Olson, Harper, Trey Turner, and Corbin Carroll. And that then gets us to the Alonso, Riley, Machado group. So Alonso is the 10th best odds to win the MVP. And a contract year, would not be mad at you at all if you wanted to ride that throughout the season. Personally, I think Lindor is a better bet to win the MVP because F-WAR matters, baseball reference WAR matters, and Lindor consistently is at least a 6-win player. Last year, he put up a 6-win season with the bum elbow. If this ends up being Lindor is the best season in a Mets uniform, and based on where he's at in his career, there's every chance it could be. He is a guy that is capable of winning an MVP. Uptick in stats a little bit if he goes 40-40 instead of 30-30, or even 40-30 with 40 home runs, 30 stolen bases. I think that's conceivable if he can, hit it for a little bit of a higher average, get on base a little bit more while winning a Gold Glove and leading the Mets into the playoffs. I could see the complete season happening for Lindor where he actually puts together an 8-win season. He's done it before with the Guardians, or I guess then the Cleveland Indians. I wouldn't be shocked on Lindor winning an MVP at some point in a Mets uniform. I'd be surprised, but not shocked. Alonso, it's just more of a long shot. He'd have to put up just a bananas home run season. Like, he'd have to hit 60 bombs and drive in 140 and just absolutely blow his contract year out of the water, which if there was a year to bet on Alonso to win the MVP, do it in a contract year. I'd probably stay away from both of them. But if you want to bet on a Met to win the MVP, to me, it's Lindor. Now, another interesting note on MVP odds. Brandon Nimmo has the same MVP odds as Cody Bellinger, a former MVP. I just want to put that out there. That's it. It's plus 10,000. Not going to happen likely, but hey, interesting to note. Cy Young, Kodai Senga at plus 1,600. Stay away now because of the injury. But seventh best odds. I believe that hasn't changed since the injury. So I was looking at that like a couple weeks ago, and I think it was at plus 1,600. Again, though, injured pitcher. Don't bet on him on a futures. Rookie of the year, there's only one Met that you can find at FanDuel. That is Luis Angel Acuna, plus 1,100. That's the worst odds out of all these guys, or the longest odds, I should say. It's because you don't even know if he's going to be playing with the Mets for any large portion of this season. Although we will talk about a good game from Acuna in the Grapefruit League in the next segment here. Now, here's the one bet that I like more than any, I think. This is the one that I circle and say, yeah, if you're going to bet on any of these futures, maybe this is the play. Carlos Mendoza to win Manager of the Year. Let me lay out the case. Last year, Skip Schumacher with the Marlins helped lead that team into the playoffs, right? They were incredible in one-run games. He gets a lot of credit for that. Might have been a little bit of a fluky, lucky season for that Marlins team, but no, they were in it all year. They were motivated, and they found their way into October, which is not a small feat in Miami, where they have not made the playoffs in a full season since 2003. For all of that, Skip Schumacher won the Manager of the Year. Carlos Mendoza is a rookie manager. The Mets coming off an awful season. If they go on and make the playoffs, and no one wants to award Dave Roberts or Brian Schnicker with the Manager of the Year, even if their teams win 110 games, because their teams are just loaded. And the Phillies, have a good season, not great. They're sitting at 87 wins and make the playoffs. There's just not another team that overperforms to an extreme, but the Mets are one that actually sneaks into the playoffs. Carlos Mendoza has a good chance to be named the Manager of the Year as a rookie manager. I feel like rookie managers always have a little bit of a better shot at it if their team can exceed expectations. Already said the Mets over-under win totals at 81.5. They're plus 196 to make the playoffs. So you could bet that plus 196. You bet, $10 and you get about 20 back. Or you can say, hey, if the Mets make the playoffs, Carlos Mendoza has a really good chance to be Manager of the Year. You bet $10 on Mendoza to be the Manager of the Year. You get what, $120? I think that's my favorite bet out of all these. I'm not going to lay, a paycheck on Mendoza to be Manager of the Year. It's kind of a funny thing to bet on. But if you consider, all of these different bets that we've talked about, that's the one that I look at and say, yeah, I'll throw $10 there. I throw $10 there, $5 on McNeil to lead the league in hits, and those things happen. Hey, we're throwing a little party here in my house where I'll be celebrating a great Mets season and being able to pay for that party in a big way thanks to FanDuel. Anyway, it was fun for me to go through all these odds, and I always like to do one betting preview show heading into the season. What the odds are telling us is the Mets are a 500 baseball team. Their chance to make the playoffs are pretty slim. There's some players who can stand out this year, but I think the underdog is sometimes more fun to root for than the team that's favorited, especially when it starts to go sideways. It's going to hurt a lot less if the Mets miss the playoffs this year than last year, which was just the massive disappointment. Better off to be set up to be surprised and happy than surprised and disappointed. Anyway, let's move over to the last game we saw the Mets play, which was on Monday, the Grapefruit League game. I'll go through my notes from what happened, some of the interesting players that stood out. We'll get to all that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your car or truck, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. If you're an everyday listener to the show and you don't want to miss out on any of your Mets coverage throughout the season, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where I can send you updates anytime something breaks on the Mets. It's where we'll be sending out lineups throughout the season. So if you want to know who the starting nine is before the Mets game that night, you'll get a text message sent to your phone. It's also where we're going to be running our signed giveaways throughout the season for some signed memorabilia. So if you want to be part of all of that extra coverage on the Mets, you can find a link in the episode description to become a Locked On Mets insider, or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now let's go over some Grapefruit League action on Monday. Max Kranick looked really good. He was the starting pitcher in the game, pitched 2 perfect innings, and had 2 strikeouts. Carlos Mendoza raved about him a little bit after the game, talking about his 2-seam fastball, which he just picked up recently. Guy does throw hard, so now having another variation of his fastball to go 4-seam, 2-seam with a slider. He's an interesting pitcher to watch in camp. Kind of a dark horse to make this team, and I think the real reason for that is he doesn't have any options left. The Mets picked him up off of waivers during the offseason. If you're looking at a 6 starter, or somebody gets hurt in that rotation, but particularly a 6 starter swingman type that can be in the bullpen to start the year and make spot starts, if the competition comes down to Kranick, Budo, and Lucchesi, and all of them are throwing the ball well, both Budo and Lucchesi have options. So Kranick could definitely make this team. He's coming off Tommy John, which happened in 2022. He did return last year, though, which is great because that means he had a healthy offseason. Made 9 starts. Those are rehab-type starts. 7 of those took place in AAA, where he pitched 16 and a third innings, and he pitched to a 2.76 ERA. So the stuff was playing down the stretch last year. He had a full offseason to get himself right. Like I said, he throws hard, big guy, 6'3", who was a starting pitcher with the Pirates. I thought all offseason he was going to be a relief pitcher, which was just a mistake on my end. I didn't realize he would still be trying to be stretched out as a starter. And he's just an interesting name to watch here because he's a little bit more of an unknown. He's 26 years old, like I said. A guy that could pop and be kind of a diamond in the rough pickup that the Mets would have made, even if he just stays on the team throughout the season and gives you a Trevor Williams 2022-esque run where he eats up some innings and pitches to a low 4s or a sub 4 ERA, high 3s. That would be a huge find off of waivers. Moving on to some other pitchers that threw the ball well, Tyler Stewart and Joander Suarez each put up 2 scoreless frames. These are guys that'll start the year in Double-A most likely. They each finished the year in Double-A last year and pitched really well. Suarez was the guy that threw the no-hitter. Stewart, of course, we talked about a bunch, was leading the minor leagues in ERA for a long time last year when he was in High-A Brooklyn. Still for a little bit in Binghamton, but then he had a couple blow-up starts. These are more starters that give you some depth in the upper levels of the farm system. And if either of them has another great year, you never know. They could be knocking on the door by the end of this season. Looking at the hitters, Trace Thompson had the big game, 5 RBIs. He hit a grand slam in the 3rd inning and had an RBI single in the 5th. So a 2-for-3 day with those 5 ribbies. Trace Thompson, of course, is known for being Klay Thompson's brother. He has had some good seasons with the Dodgers over the years throughout his career. I personally think it's a long shot that he's going to make this team because they're already pretty righty heavy in the outfield. You got Starling Marte, Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor. I just don't know if they're going to want to add another right-handed bat to the mix that can play the outfield. I think he's the first guy waiting in the wings in Syracuse. When they have an injury in the outfield, I think Thompson could be that guy that steps in. So I do believe we'll see him this year. I just think it's a long shot that we see him on opening day. But hey, if he gets a lot of playing time, swing the bat well, you never know. Drew Gilbert got the start in center field. He was 0 for 3 with a walk. Luis Angel Acuna started next to Lindor at second base. Good to see the two of them playing together up the middle. And there was a lot of talk after the game from Mendoza just about the mentorship of Lindor with Acuna, how they put his locker next to him in camp. Good to see that relationship developing. And there is every chance that is the Mets double play combination for the better part of the next decade. It could be Acuna, it could be Jet Williams. You never know. Those guys could end up in the outfield or at a different position, and McNeil could still be the guy for a while. But it was a good day for him. He went 2 for 3. Mendoza praised his at-bats after the game. He fell behind, hung in there, worked the count, went to the opposite field to get a hit. So a nice day for Acuna, who was getting some run here early in camp, which is good to see because he's going to start the year most likely in AAA. He's close, and he's on the 40-man roster. So I've talked about it before. I did a whole show breaking down, Acuna filling in Ronnie Mauricio's super utility type role on the 40-man roster. Essentially, obviously, Mauricio would have broken camp for sure. But Acuna's a guy that can fill in a lot of positions and is on the 40. So I expect to see him at some point this year. I really do. Jet Williams came in for Lindor, went 1 for 2, scored a run, did his thing on the bases where he went to, I don't know if it was a wild pitch. I think I saw on social it was a wild pitch, not a stolen base attempt. But the throw did come in to second, and it got through. So on a stolen base attempt or trying to advance regardless, he went first to third, then he scored on a force out. So that's the speed that Jet Williams also brings to the table. Kevin Parada went 0 for 1, but we got to see, what is that? 4 or 5 of the Mets' top prospects all entering a game that is what you pay for if you're going to see spring training games right now. Obviously, it's always good to see the Mets starters, but it's a lot more fun to see these kids get into a game and just watch them play the field, watch them get in the box, see what they can do. Guys who have yet to make their debut for the Mets this spring, still waiting on Jeff McNeil, who, remember, had a partial tear in his left UCL, so his non-throwing arm. He's been rehabbing throughout the offseason, so they're just taking their time with Jeff. He's still been doing live BP, running the bases, all that good stuff, doing fielding drills. Mendoza said, expect him to get into some games in March here. Starling Marte, I mean, we all know his health history as well as Harrison Bader. So those two guys still have not made their debuts, but they all seem to be fully healthy. There's been no reports about it. Probably just taking their time, watching them on the backfields, being a little bit more cautious because getting into a game, even a low intensity one, there's always a little bit more injury risk. So taking their time on some important players, but we'll start to see them all gear up into some games here soon. And it's just been fun to watch some baseball highlights, see some of these games, and we'll continue to monitor whatever happens in the Grapefruit League, probably in the third segment of most of these shows, just breaking down the things that jump out. Today it was Thompson and Kranick that were kind of the two stars of the day, the Cunha as well. Tomorrow, I'm sure it could be a whole other cast of characters as a lot of guys get into these games. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Appreciate all of you who tuned in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on the audio side, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We set a goal for 8,000 subs by opening day. I believe we're within 50 of getting there. So appreciate all of you who have been hitting that subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers absolutely everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.